This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Sahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 450 of the Yellowwallpod. I'm your host Stefan Butzko, and today we have nothing great to discuss as Borussia Dortmund bungled the game against Mainz and did not win the championship as we all expected and hoped for. Alongside with me to discuss the latest trauma, the lifelong wound that has been inflicted upon us, is Matthias Zug. Hello Matthias, how are you doing?
Yeah. Oh, I'm great. It's just amazing. It's wonderful to be alive. I mean, it is wonderful to be alive. But I am dead on my feet tired because I have a sick toddler. So I'm doing this on 4 hours of sleep. So I'm way too tired to rant. And I feel like sad for like 4 days now, 5 days. I don't even know. Every morning I wake up and it's like, ugh. And that usually doesn't happen with me with sporting events, but this time it did.
Yeah, this one's going to stink.
How are you, Stefan?
Yeah, no, let's just announce the next co-host, which is Lars. Who is Lars Pollmann? Hello, Lars. How are you doing? If you want to reveal your emotional state.
I'm honestly fine, Stefan. The trick is to lose faith in the good in football years ago. And now everything is just, black on black on black.
So you're saying you were emotionally unavailable, thus you couldn't be hurt in the first place. I guess that is one strategy to approach it. Unfortunately, I don't have that approach, and thus I'm very sad, very disappointed, and also very annoyed. But for whatever reason, anger was not one of the emotions I was feeling. Obviously, there are plenty of things to be mad about, but for whatever reason, I don't know. I was just sad for the team. So, Matthias, you were already throwing stats around in the pre-pod. So... Yeah. My
statistic of the damned that I like to keep an eye on are played crosses. And when we go back to, for instance, I always did this comparison when Dortmund under Terzic kept on beating Nagelsmann's RB Leipzig. And Leipzig was hitting 40, 50 plus crosses, which isn't typical Leipzig, not typical Nagelsmann in that season. Well, Dortmund crossed the ball 62 times against Mainz. 62. And Stefan, would you like to let people know what the second highest amounts of crosses were this season?
Yeah, I looked it up for you, Matthias. It was the 1-1 draw in Bochum. Another great game where Dortmund had 34. And the third highest, for people are wondering, was the 1-0 win against Schalke with 32 crosses. And the fourth highest actually the very first game of the season, 28 against 1860 Munich. But yeah, just to put it in perspective, because you said this must be a record for the previous seasons. I only looked up this one, but I mean 62 highest, 34 second highest is already mind-blowing.
It belies the frustration and just, I don't know, desperation that Dortmund felt after, I will call it, the 10 minutes of doom between minute 15 and minute 25. But I mean, yes, 62 crosses is bad. Dortmund, though, did actually those crosses, especially the ones going to the back post, and especially after Duranville came on, who we will obviously talk about later, there were actually some really good opportunities created from that. If there was a better header there, maybe not Marco Reus, who's not exactly a monster in the air. It could have. It's a could have game, right, Stefan? I mean, statistically speaking, in every category, Dortmund were not just slightly better than Mainz, they were by miles better than Mainz. If you look at everything from possession, passing, progressive passing, everything. But the two statistics or three statistics that matter, obviously crosses, that's a bad indication. Shots on target, 40% for Mainz. I mean, 4 of 10, but still 32% for Dortmund, 9 of 28. And of course, the most important one, 2 goals for Mainz, 2 goals for Dortmund. And, you mentioned, the trauma this was inflicted. And I think we've all established the fact that I'm a bit older than the two of you. And I've been through a lot with Borussia Dortmund since like the early 80s, like my earliest memories when I was like 5-6 years old, going back to like 83, 84, when Dortmund were just really bad. They were not a good team in the Bundesliga at that time. And actually in my youth, they played against Fortuna Köln to make sure they could even stay in the Bundesliga. And the biggest true disappointment on the pitch prior to Saturday was obviously the Champions League loss. But this hurt way more. This hurt so much more because I equated it to my wife, who tried to understand, okay, why was this worse than the Champions League? I said, imagine going into the Champions League final and you've got a two-goal lead and you lose. So that's what this feels like. And that's really the problem. If Dortmund were equal on points with Bayern going into it, this wouldn't have hurt as much. But this... the setup. I just need to become significantly more pessimistic. I need to become more like my dad and literally every relative in the Münsterland and just be like, you know what, it's probably going to go poorly and then be positively surprised. So with that segue, how are you, Lars?
Speaking of pessimism, I guess.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. Because in all honesty, in the last episode, you were the one who said, well, guys, it's not done yet. And I really should have just listened to you. I
mean, I said, I think chances of like 85%.
That's exactly what you said.
85% surety, which obviously wasn't low enough, I suppose.
No, I actually think, given how this game went, they were they're not high enough. I think maybe 90%. I give Mainz getting a result in this game a 10% chance.
Well, after the fact they did, Stefan, so it's not necessarily a relevant discussion. I mean,
it's not.
Ultimately, Dortmund obviously played well enough in a vacuum to win this game, but precisely what I feared would happen last week did happen, that the occasion or the weight of the occasion was too big. The game state in both stadiums didn't really help Dortmund, obviously. I mean, Mainz scored with their first opportunity after a set piece. That tends to happen from time to time to good teams even, so it's not like that's something that should have or would have in usual circumstances been too big of a problem for Dortmund, but going down, missing the penalty, especially I think Aller missing the penalty, so your starting striker, the guy you usually rely on for goal scoring purposes. Bayern going ahead, I think there was just a lot of bad shit happening at the same time, basically, for Dortmund, and once it was 2-0, I think most people probably were hoping for Cologne to get a result against Bayern, even though Dortmund, as I said, played well enough in a vacuum to get the result they needed against Mainz, and probably would have if they scored, the equalizer like 5 minutes from the end. I think there's a pretty high chance that the adrenaline would have pushed them towards the third goal and the championship, but obviously that's not how it happened. And I think you said trauma. I don't know if I would go that far for me personally, but that's just, how I manage expectations versus how other people do that. But I certainly think it's going to be very hard for those involved, especially, the players. I have no concept of how someone like Marco Reus, who's always been talked about as, the guy who can't close, who's not winning the big ones, who's always injured in the wrong moment, who's never showing up in the biggest games. I don't know how someone like that can lift this down. Obviously, the support of the fans will help with that, and I think that's something to talk about in a very positive light, because the reaction of the stadium, even a grump like myself, got goosebumps from that, and that's something that's certainly going to help the team. But I just can't see a way, or rather, I just don't have a concept of how you deal with something like this, because I don't know the last time. I think the last time a team lost the lead in the Bundesliga on the final match day was Leverkusen, like 25 or so years ago. The Unterhaching drama where Ballack scored an own goal, but that wasn't at Leverkusen, and that's certainly also, even if it had been at Leverkusen, not the same as failing to win ahead of 80,000 people and thrice that, 4 times that, basically already counting on the parade on the next day. So maybe that's a lesson to be learned for everyone. Maybe not spend so much time on planning parades and cutting off cities and making plans for hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe finish the job first and worry about that stuff later.
Well, I would have to disagree with that, because realistically, you have to have a contingency plan for a very realistic title win. And
yeah, you can have contingencies, but that shouldn't be the entire focus ahead of the game. I mean, I don't necessarily blame authorities or even the club, but just the general vibe wasn't, hey, let's finish this. It was, hey, it's already basically done. Let's get ready to celebrate, even ourselves. I mean, last week we talked about how people shouldn't come to Dortmund on Saturday, or I talked about that, because it might be difficult to actually catch the spot to watch the game, but rather come on Sunday for the parade. And I mean, for there to be a parade, you have to win the game. It's the same story as I think when the Patriots played the Eagles in the 2004, I want to say, Super Bowl, and ahead of the game, Bill Belichick told the Patriots team the parade route of the Eagles, and that was the bulletin board material, or however you want to call it. And obviously that's not what happened with Mainz, but I think just generally I think a more business-like approach, not considering the task to be done already, would have helped them, but obviously hindsight is always 20/20.
well,
Yeah, I have to agree real quick, because I remember, I think it was even on the German news, they showed like bakeries in Dortmund baking like cookies and stuff with Deutscher Meister written on it. That's ridiculous. I mean, even at the time before the result happened, I'm like, okay, but what if for some reason Dortmund doesn't do it? What are you going to do with all that food? That was, I guess, the parent in me is like, don't waste food. But yeah, that was a little bit much. I guess it's a painful lesson that Dortmund really hasn't had to experience. Honestly, it's not like a cup final where you really don't know what's going to happen. It was weighted in Dortmund's favor, and we just all assumed. And I think we all know what happens when you assume.
Well, counterpoint, I refuse to give in to that a little bit, because I enjoy the excitement beforehand and people dreaming about a championship and whatnot, as we all did. So,
of course,
again, obviously it's unfortunate, but I don't know if necessarily printed T-shirts and designed pastries, if you will, really decided that Andreas Hansche Olsen scores a tap-in at the near post, and Karim Onisivo scores the free header just so that Gregor Kobel can't steer it around the post, but it just rolls into the net. Like, these are unfortunate things that happen, and obviously I also don't think that Sebastian Aller, because of that particular thing, didn't score. I think it's quite natural to have this sort of destiny vibe, if you will. And if it doesn't happen in the end, it looks bad. Also, if you look at the social media posts that Dortmund put out beforehand. But you know what? I honestly don't care what it looks like in the end. And because you are allowed to be excited about a championship a couple of days before a big game like this, and Mainz really had nothing to play for, and Bo Svensson said it himself. It was sort of a Freudian slip in an interview with Archie after the game. Archie Rentoto from ESPN, where he said this wasn't the plan. But kudos to Mainz. They really put up a fight. They did not roll over like Gladbach and Wolfsburg did beforehand. It's, to me personally, it's extra annoying that the hashtag sad pieces was sort of trending, at least in my head. I didn't tweet it out, but it was implied, as you all know. And of course, it's also a little annoying that it was Sebastian Aller, I think, who left the near post open for the corner kick, and then I think Emre Can didn't quite get close enough to defend Karim Onisivo, if I'm not mistaken. And very bitter also, Lars, as you said, that Dortmund didn't score sooner, because obviously we don't know how the game goes, but I feel like if Aller scores the penalty, chances are Dortmund come away with the win, and the momentum swings way differently, and the first half itself goes pretty differently. Matthias, what do you make of Mainz playing maybe even over the edge, if you will, because injuries did happen? Karim Adeyemi had to come off. Marius Wolf had to come off at halftime because Mainz did play a pretty rough way. What did you make of these substitutions, and how did they, in your opinion, change the game, with Marco Reus coming in around the 40th minute mark, and I think it was Moukoko on for Wolf at halftime?
Well, I mean, it changed the complexity of the game. Marco Reus disappointingly had I really no impact on the game. Not that Adeyemi really had an impact prior to the injury, but he's an explosive enough player that you can always imagine that happening, even though this game really wasn't set up for him. Mainz a lot of times sat deep. However, those moments they did come forward, Dortmund were missing the likes of Karim Adeyemi, because if they could have broken a bit faster in those moments where Mainz were in transition, we've seen it time and time again. The fact that Mainz played, let's say, a little rougher, it doesn't really bother me, to be perfectly honest. Each side had one booking, so in that sense, it wasn't that much harsher than we've seen before. They're just, players that kind of disappointed. I thought Julian Brandt wasn't good. To me, he was disappointing in that game. Guerreiro, I actually thought, played quite well. And Terzic had to switch things around. I think maybe the Moukoko thing was maybe a little too early in the match to go with that, but at the same time, you got to deal with the cards you are dealt. I think maybe they could have done that a little bit different, because it just changed the shape a little bit too much, and that's really when a lot of the crosses, at least it felt like, started coming. It was like said, in a vacuum, like Lars said, Dortmund did enough to win the game, but they didn't do enough to win the game. They didn't get Heidenheim time. Heidenheim got 5 more minutes than Dortmund did in the end, and then they got the 3-2 winner that made them champions of the Zweite Bundesliga. And so, you tack on 5 more minutes, and I agree, Dortmund probably would have squeezed something in, but we don't know. I mean, I was watching the game, and I remember saying, if Dortmund score before the 70th minute, then they've got a chance to win this thing. And they scored in the 68th minute. So, hope was back. And I was like, okay, they've got over 20 minutes to get a couple of goals. Dortmund can do it. And they can. But unfortunately, they didn't. And then there was that chaotic moment, of course, where Köln got the equalizer. And I was just like, I can't, nerves-wise, I was broken at that point. And it was a tough game. It was a tough 10-minute spell between 15 and 24 for Dortmund, but particularly for Aller. Because like you said, him moving off a near post when he shouldn't have, that opened it up. And it was frustrating because set pieces really weren't Dortmund's weakness this season. And so that was really annoying to have that happen. And then, some people question the second penalty shout. Was that a penalty? Was that not a penalty?
I don't know. Lars, what do you think?
I don't know. It would have been really harsh to give that a penalty, but I could see the shout. I can understand why there was a shout for it, obviously.
Yeah, Lars, what do you make of the second, the first no call?
You mean the push on Guerrero, I suppose?
Yes.
Play on. I mean, I think when you miss a penalty, you kind of lose the right to appeal for another that isn't blatant, because this would have been a judgment call, and I think if it had been given, I suppose Mainz wouldn't have been able to argue it's a definite wrong call, but I don't want those given. And obviously, while it would have helped Dortmund, I think given missing the first one, there's a bit of a chance at least that the next guy also has, the jitters, because you basically know if you miss a second penalty, you're definitely done because you're not coming back from that.
Yeah. If any one of you want to argue that Aller took it instead of Emre Can, because I personally thought it's kind of fine for Aller to take it. I don't know.
It's not fine. I hate this. I talked about this after I think didn't
the Adeyemi hat trick.
Adeyemi against Wolfsburg, was it, or was it Gladbach?
No, Wolfsburg.
Wolfsburg, yeah.
I argued it then, and I'll argue it now. If you have a very good penalty taker whom you want to take penalties, and obviously Emre Can is both a good penalty taker. He's never missed one for Dortmund. He's never missed one in his professional career even. And he's on the pitch, and he was the designated taker. You let him take all the penalties while he's on the pitch. Even if Aller had scored, or even if Adeyemi rather had scored, because the argument is easier to make in a game they won anyway, I still don't want another one to take the penalty. If the head coach makes the decision that Emre Can is your penalty taker, then let Emre Can take the fucking penalties. I don't get this. As I said, regardless of championship permutations and whatever, it's just such a pet peeve of mine. If you have a penalty taker, let him take the penalties. That's what he's there for. That was Emre Can's one calling card until this second half of the current or just finished campaign. That was the one thing he did very well, even when he wasn't playing well otherwise. He was a very good penalty taker. Obviously, Sebastian Aller, during his time at Frankfurt and at Ajax, and presumably also at Utrecht, and maybe in the French under 21 or wherever he was. He has a good penalty record, but he hasn't taken a penalty for Dortmund. The situation was obviously quite overwhelming. I don't understand why in such a game, such an atmosphere, you are already 1-0 down. The head coach doesn't intervene and say, no, I picked Emre Can to take penalties. Let him take the penalty. And also, I don't understand why Can didn't fight it, but maybe that's, again, hindsight taking the better of me. But
this is the thing.
But I will say, and people can actually take a look at my Twitter account, that I made this argument before, and I don't want to feel vindicated, but it's kind of proving my point now.
Well, first of all, you were absolutely right, and second of all, I 100% agree. But the thing is, I don't want to lament it too much, because I don't want to... If Emre Can can tell Sebastian Aller, well, my guy, you're not taking this penalty, I personally can't either. You know what I'm saying is, like, in this situation, I don't know if I would have held on to the ball if I was Emre Can. This is sort of what I was saying. Obviously, yes, on paper and in reality, Emre Can absolutely 100% should have taken the penalty, and not Sebastian Aller or anyone. We could argue that had there been Marco Reus on the field at this point, he should have or could have taken the penalty, because he is very good at penalty taking too. But then again, I don't know if Marco Reus has the mental fortitude for this exact moment. So I was really hoping for Emre Can to take the penalty. And I'll be honest, when I saw Sebastian Haller take the ball out of Emre Can's hand, I felt a little disheartened, and I did not feel very good about this situation, because when Edin Terzic said before the game, we will not do anything special, we do pretty much everything that we've done before, that sort of felt out of order to me already. And of course, it is a very significant moment in this club's history now, I want to say. So, Matthias, if you want to chime in on that.
I mean, I agree. It's Emre Can is the penalty taker. I also agree that Emre Can can't really be like wrestling back and forth for the ball, because we've seen that before in the sport like at the professional level.
As soon as there's a wrestle for the ball ahead of a penalty, it's getting missed.
And it's just dumb. It's childish, and it's not like Terzic can call from the side, Sebastian, you can't take it, because it also looks stupid. And I'm not going to put blame on Sebastian Haller for being like, I want to take it.
Well, no, he has to be praised to actually step up in that situation and take the ball, because it's...
Ish.
Yeah.
Yeah, ish. However, at the same time, he hasn't taken one this season. Emre Can has. And in a moment like that, maybe you don't let that little bit of ego creep in to be like, I want to take this penalty. I haven't taken one for the club. It's the big, whatever situation to do it. Obviously, it's hard to criticize Sebastian Haller, given what the season's been and what he's been through. However, in my opinion, that is a point of criticism. Both his mistake at the corner, and then 9 minutes later, the penalty. Those were mistakes by him. It was also a very poorly shot penalty. And I feel like after that, I'm not going to say Haller was broken mentally after that, but he was an almost non-factor in the match after that. I mean, he had that one really good opportunity sliding in, even though it's not as good as Malen's opportunity that he kind of got surprised by. And Donyell Malen, I thought, was also underwhelming in this match. So, yeah, it's just not a good day. But, Hummels and Süle played well. So there's that. I mean, Süle they both had really important tackles and situations. And there were certain players that did really well and some that just fell flat on the day. And that was unfortunate.
Yeah, Matthias, what do you make of the subs that happened later on? Because when you talk about underwhelming, I think Julian Brandt also didn't have his best game. Donyell Malen, as you said, he had a couple of really good moments, but not in the same caliber as in previous games. But I talked about this before, that the jitters that you get are certainly real, and everything just becomes a little bit harder to do. You tighten up, the flow of Donyell Malen in previous games was also just where he was just doing and not thinking, and this is sort of where the thinking starts again. So I understand why they weren't playing at their very best, because if they had, Dortmund probably would have won this game quite handily. Nevertheless, I'll be honest, I was surprised that Julian Duranville made his debut in such an important game for Julian Brandt after only 62 minutes. And of course, Gio Reyna then replaced Donyell Malen as well. So, Matthias, these two substitutes made a very positive impact. Please talk about them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Duranville, that was a gutsy call to bring him on, and it almost paid off. I thought he played really, really well. He had some great moments, some great looks. He lost the ball, won it back, so his pressing is there, his hustle is there, floated in a few good crosses that did create good chances. So that was really nice to see, and he wasn't intimidated by the moment. At 17, I think he's still just 17, right? So that was really, really positive. Gio Reyna, I thought was quite impactful. Now he's come in off the bench a few times and scored goals, but I thought he was better in this sub appearance than in the previous ones where he scored, just because he did more. There was more there. I did see some people online question Dortmund's starting lineup and why Reina didn't start right away, why not Moukoko or Royce, but that's all, I mean, honestly, that's gibberish garbage, just because the other players that started have been in absolutely blazing, amazing form. That's not the issue at all. I mean, everyone agreed that that's the starting team you play in, but I thought Duranville and Reina were really good. I thought Moukoko was pretty much absent. I thought Modeste may as well have not even been on the pitch, personally, because I don't even know if he had a touch. I can't even remember.
I feel like he would have scored the one Royce free kick had Hummels not headed it away from goal. True.
But, until I looked at the stats that he got subbed in, I honestly completely forgot he got subbed in. I thought those two were really good. They obviously, Duranville has a future at the club. Gio Reyna, we'll have to see. I don't think there's any talk about him leaving in the summer, especially given all the people that are leaving that we now know. One of which is, of course, a player that scored in this match, Rafael Guerreiro, who I thought had a good match overall. But those two were impactful. Creativity from Reina that Julian Brandt did not have came in, and Duranville was also creative and harder for Mainz to stop than Daniel Mahlen in that time frame. So very, very good overall.
I mean, Duranville had also the advantage that there is no scouting report on him from Mainz players, so they just don't know what his strengths and weaknesses are, and so there's not any preparation, and so he had the element of surprise, quite literally. Lars, I want to hear from you as well about Duranville and, of course, Gio Reyna, the American boy, since we have a lot of American listeners, and it's rare this season, unfortunately, that he has good moments, so when they do happen, I feel like they should be talked about a little bit.
I mean, first of all, it feels like you're grasping at straws to talk about something positive.
I am.
After the worst game of the season, in terms of outcome. And also, I don't disagree entirely with the notion that Reina hasn't had good moments this season, because he's been the singularly best sub-performer, if you like, in terms of goal involvements. And without Reina's substitutions, Dortmund wouldn't have been in a position to
that's correct. I just said he didn't have that many because he obviously most of the time came off the bench and had a lot of DNPs to his name as well. So that's what I mean.
Yeah, but I genuinely don't know what else to say. I mean, okay, they played well. Duranville took guys on. I think his lack of experience was a positive for them, because quite frankly, he probably didn't really fully understand the weight of the situation and just went out and played for the first time in months. I think that's something that such a young player with his strengths is just able to do. I mean, I think the same probably could have been said about Jamie Bynoe-Gittens had he been available without his shoulder injury. And yeah, Reina played well. Created a couple of chances here and there, was more lively than some of the other guys that played, but ultimately it kind of rings hollow when we are talking a few days after they blow the title about that two subs appearances weren't too bad, or were quite good actually. I mean, I genuinely couldn't care less about how Reina and Duranville played, because their impact was ultimately not good enough.
Fair. Yeah, I mean, Alea scored the offside goal, and after Niklas Süle scored in the, 96th minute or whenever this goal happened, Dortmund had like two more desperation heaves, and I feel like the final one was sort of in the vicinity of Anthony Modeste, and that he didn't manage to reach it because too slow, sort of perfectly summed it all up for me in that moment, and I don't know. It's a difficult game to talk about, Sola, so I apologize if I harangue you with the wrong questions. But Matthias, as Lars already said, when we talk about positivity, which is obviously hard to do, but nevertheless, I feel like the end of the match did show a range of emotion that you do not find at different clubs, let's say. So maybe talk about how the fans received the team and consoled them at the end.
You know, I mean, it's that's one of the things that makes this club so special, because obviously in München, a reaction like that wouldn't have happened had they lost the title. We've also seen it with other clubs where disappointing results have resulted in fans attacking each other, attacking players or whatever. And here they celebrated the team, because obviously if you look back at where the team was in January or November before the World Cup break, nobody thought they would be challenging for a title. I mean, a lot of people were questioning, would they even qualify for Europe, let alone the Champions League. And it's been a hell of a run the second half of the season, and they deserve to be applauded for that and built up. And they realized, and this is a great thing about Dortmund fans in this moment, they realized also that these players, and a lot of them are young, few of them are leaving, that they didn't need, they understood what had happened. They understood that they lost the title. And to build them up like that, seeing the reception of Edin Terzic, who obviously was very emotional about this, given what the club means to him on a personal level. And those are the moments that Borussia Dortmund haven't had since Jürgen Klopp left. Where you see a celebrating of the coach crying, even in moments where you're not winning, where you lost, a low moment. And that emotional connection that between Klopp and Terzic, none of the other managers that were there had. None of them. Not a single one. And that is, one of the big things there. And that also showed to me again why I do believe that Terzic is the right man for the job. He still needs to learn. He still needs to grow in his tactical acumen. But he gets the club and the fans get him. And that was a huge disconnect with Rose, Favre. We're not going to talk about the two Peter season and Thomas Tuchel. There was always a disconnect. And here there is a true connection. And that matters at Borussia Dortmund more than at, the guys down in Bavaria.
Yeah, I mean, it is nice to have at least this, as stupid as it sounds, but it was a great moment, even though it was a terrible moment, if you know what I mean, because Dortmund obviously did have a great reaction, and the stadium wasn't half empty by the time the game ended, and sort of this collective mourning, if you will, showed that it's not just corporate nonsense football, but it actually is very meaningful. And I don't know. I don't have that many more things to say about this whole coming together after the game and the reactions. Lars, if you have a few thoughts, be my guest. I don't know.
No, I think we've covered it basically. As I said before, certainly something that will help players get over this, and I'm assuming this is going to carry over into the next season. I think, given the reputation of the Yellow Wall and the Westfalenstadion in general, I think I'm probably not too harsh when I say that Dortmund's atmosphere at times is overrated, because the stadium is just too big, and there are too many fans who are there for the first time at every game, or not regulars, don't know the songs, don't really know the rhythms and how atmosphere in a football stadium that big works. So I think a case to be made that the Westfalenstadion is at its best maybe 2-3 times a year. So for the Schalke home game for Bayern, and for the biggest game of the season basically, which this time happened to be about the championship, but might be a Champions League home game or whatever. And I think it would be a great achievement outside of the innermost sporting context if the togetherness that has now been displayed so wonderfully would also carry over into next season and also have a bit more of an impact in terms of the home advantage in terms of atmosphere. Obviously Dortmund failed to win only I think 2 home matches in the Bundesliga this season, but
one
I still think,
although Mainz feels like a loss.
Failed to win.
Oh yeah, sorry, my bad.
It's Bremen and Mainz. I just think that would be, I don't necessarily want to say a positive to come from this, but obviously everyone will understand what I mean.
Yeah. Lars, do you think that, pretty much everyone from coach to sporting director to, I don't know, whatever position Watzke has right now, immediately saying that, we'll try to attack again next season? Do you think this is a different mindset at the club? Because obviously Dortmund did not approach the Bundesliga this time around with the clear declaration that they are trying to win it. Was sort of, we want to qualify for the Champions League and hope for the best sort of approach. Do you think this has a positive or a negative impact for Dortmund, considering the rebuild we will obviously go through and might already have to discuss now, because there are obviously some player news that we can get to in a minute?
I think it's one of the most overblown storylines of every season around Dortmund, whether they declare their intentions to win the league or not. The truth of the matter is the only club that determines championships in the Bundesliga for the foreseeable future is Bayern Munich. So considering that we can expect Bayern to have a crazy summer of net spending in the 9 figures, with, I don't know, maybe Declan Rice plus Randal Kolo Muani or any other striker of some international level. If Dortmund declare their intention to win the title next season, I will say good luck, because that's going to be very difficult given how Bayern react to failures, and they didn't even completely fail this time around. Every single year this talk is pushed by certain parts of the media, and every time I kind of shake my head, because I'm not in a football club. I haven't been a professional player. I've only coached at the grassroots level, so maybe I just don't have the capacity to understand how a declaration such as this one might, change how you view yourself and give you more belief or whatever. But I just can't imagine that it makes any sort of difference whether Hans-Joachim Watzke in August says, by the way, we want to win the title. For a club of a certain level and certain ambitions, it's a given that given the chance you want to win the title, and everybody knows, even the most optimistic of players who are more important than anyone else in this regard will know that the decision isn't being made by Dortmund over 34 match days. It's being made by Bayern, and how they take care of their own business, which is dominating the Bundesliga, and chances are they will over the next few years, which is what makes what happened on Saturday that much more unbearable, because this might have been, as Terzic said after the Bochum game, I think the once in a lifetime, or at least once in a blue moon kind of chance to win the title.
Yeah, this is really the most annoying or unbearable part, as he said about it, is that we have no idea when this chance might come again, because, we just had the 10-year anniversary of the loss in the Champions League final, and obviously Dortmund haven't been anywhere near it since. When Jürgen Klopp lost the game, he basically was like, yep, we'll be back, but obviously we weren't. So it is a tough pill to swallow in that regard. And also, there are no run-it backs for, players like Jude Bellingham or Rafael Guerreiro. And who knows if Marco Reus will ever come this close to winning the title, or Edin Terzic for that matter. So, it's really bitter. It's also very annoying because, having to see Bayern celebrate their 11th championship, which is, to me, it's not really a real celebration. It's sort of going down the drain, like, if we're honest. And yeah, they had their few songs at the expense of Dortmund, but honestly, I couldn't care less. And on top of it all, it's also just annoying that Dortmund have this label of being bottlers now, because I said it before, that in my view, Dortmund are not a bottling team, but the latest evidence contradicts my previous statement. So, Matthias, how do Dortmund recover from this? Because recovery is obviously a very important term, considering how this went, because it was a very big blow.
Well, I'd advise them to do better than after the Champions League loss. That was quite the hit emotionally there. It's hard to say, because there's going to be a certain amount of rebuild in certain positions, predominantly in central midfield. So the attitude in the club is going to be a little bit different, because a lot of players are going to be gone that have either been very impactful in a short period, Bellingham, or have been there for a long time. In Guerreiro, he's been there for 7 seasons, which is kind of crazy to think about how long he's been at Borussia Dortmund. And he's been through a lot of highs and lows with the club.
It's funny that at the end of it, I'm just so insanely annoyed by Guerreiro leaving, and I couldn't. Oh yeah, I just want to leap off a bridge when I read the rumors that he might end up at Bayern Munich. That's just too much for me to take.
Oh yeah, no, to be brutally honest, despite 7 years, if he goes to Bayern, that would for me at least, and this is not being professional, but being just a fan, that would very much taint my opinion of Rafael Guerreiro. But that being put aside, it's hard to say how the club's going to recover from this. I mean, you have players that have been there, done that, and won, like Mats Hummels, Niklas Süle also, and there are players that have won titles. Sebastian Haller has won things with Ajax, and with Frankfurt. So it's not like it's a totally open green space of players who haven't had highs and lows. And I think someone like Sebastian Haller can given that he survived cancer, can compartmentalize this enough to push on and continue forward. I think Edin Terzic can as well. So I think it's just back to processing this. It'll take a few weeks. And then let the powers that be, the Elefantenrunde, do their thing, and then come back and go back to work. I mean, they are professionals and continue pushing forward. And I want to kind of go back to what you stated before. I mean, some people are using, the term like, oh, they Dortmunded it. I mean, in my opinion, you can just go take a leap with something like that. There are a few other ones who decided to punch down conveniently at Dortmund after this result, saying, oh, it's just not a winning club culture. Yeah, winning a Champions League, multiple German titles and cups, definitely.
Yeah, I think I saw this on ESPN FC with Jan-Arne Fjordhoft. I didn't even click on it, but I did see this headline, and I must say, this guy can just go fuck himself so hard.
Yeah, and I replied to him. I mean, and the thing is, somebody pointed out, well, like a few days ago, he was talking about Dortmund's winning club culture. And that's just convenient punching down to get a click reaction. And a few other people have said that as well. And to me, those aren't real fans. They need to go find a new club. You're invited to go to München in that case. Now, there's a difference between not a winning club and not a winning team. You can make the argument. We've made the argument over the last few seasons that there are people in this squad that too often have dropped their shoulders and given up. Guerrero being one of them, Gio Reyna being one of them. Guerrero kind of got past that. Reyna, I think by being kind of that Joker role, was forced to get past it because he didn't have enough time to be mopey. So, I mean, you can make that, not argument, but at least point in that direction. You know, I mean, Bellingham works really hard, but he too, when things just really aren't going his way, he gets pretty petulant on the pitch, but he's also really, really young. But a few of these people are no longer going to be here. And that's going to be the core thing about how Dortmund can advance past this is, and I hate talking about mentality because Dortmund have shown great mentality this season, but that does matter. People with the right mentality who can get past adversity, push on, and not give up if you're playing away to Augsburg. Obviously, this season notwithstanding, but in previous season, it's just not happening to then just give up. Those are the things you need to make sure in your recruitment now that help you push past that and build up on players that have really come back strong and redefined their career at Dortmund, like an Emre Can, like a Julian Brandt, to make sure they don't fall backwards. That's their big job, to move forward in that case.
Yeah, obviously, moving forward, we have a lot of topics, you know, on that subject. You know, how do we replace Jude Bellingham? How does Dortmund deal with the absence of Rafael Guerrero? And who else is leaving the club? But honestly, I would keep this for another time, maybe next week or the week after, whenever we can find time for another episode. Maybe there's more news available too. So, Lars, I think it's time for your last words and thoughts, because oftentimes you have something insightful to say. So if this is the case,
no, not this time, Stefan. I think we are all still a bit reeling. Even my grumpy, not as old as Matthias's ass, still reeling a little bit. So I think it's best we get out of here.
All right. To everyone out there who listened, supported, whatever, throughout the entire season, our patrons, our fans, and of course fans of Borussia Dortmund who have suffered along with us, a big thank you. It was great to have the show, sadly not as frequently as in previous seasons due to several different commitments, but I still hope you had a lot of fun this season. I think overall it was a great season, and as someone recently said, I sadly forgot who it was, that most great seasons end in tears, and this one most certainly did. And of course, also very much thank you to you, Lars and Matthias, for being great co-hosts. It's always fun to do the Yellowwallpod with you two. So yeah, I don't know if we'll be back next week, but we'll certainly be back in 2 weeks. And until then, as always, thank you for listening and goodbye.